It was Valentine's weekend, 1999. We're at this massive warehouse in East Oakland called Home Base. There were probably about 10 or 20,000 people there that night. We waited in line for 3 hours just to get in. But once we finally got inside, I felt like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. I was suddenly in this magical wonderland of lasers and colors and sounds. Everyone there had brought all these toys and accessories and lights that they were playing with. And then the music that the DJs were playing. I'd never heard this kind of music on the radio before. Everyone was just dancing to it nonstop. And then all of a sudden I'm dancing to nonstop till 6 or 7 in the morning. There really was no curfew. It just went on all night long till the sun came up. And anybody could get in. It didn't really matter how old you were because they didn't really check IDs. It was always over capacity and always really hot. There didn't seem to be very many regulations around fire or building safety codes. So eventually the city of Oakland said enough is enough. These parties are too wild and dangerous. And they decided at the end of 1999 not to issue permits for these type of shows anymore. So Home Base and a few other warehouses, they were shut down. And after that, I started waiting. I started thinking, well, eventually they'll just put in some regulations and reopen it, right? But that never ended up happening. And you know, I was 19 years old when I went to my first rave at Home Base, and just the feeling of being able to suddenly break all the normal rules of society, that's what was so unique and exciting about it. And at the same time, that type of experience couldn't last forever. So even really early on, I learned that that type of feeling was something that I would eventually have to let go of, because even if it didn't end entirely, it was somehow going to change and evolve. And that's part of the reason I've always been attracted to stories about places of creative or musical experiences, especially if those places in one way or another aren't with us anymore. The first time I went to the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, I was out there in 2012 for the annual Electric Daisy Carnival.
Hey!
EDC 2012 Las Vegas.
It's really like, people say it's a music festival, a carnival, a rave. At the end of the day, all it is a true life experience.
Sweden in the house!
She's from Sweden!
What up? Texas. Texas. We got them from all around. Vegas.
Nice.
Vegas.
Vegas.
It's a 3-day event. I'm there on the second night on Saturday. I get in at around midnight, and then once I get inside, I notice that they're moving everyone's indoors.
Hey, EDC Las Vegas. Listen. They just told me we have to shut down the show for an hour because of the wind. You see the speakers all flying around. This stuff up here is flying around. It's for your safety, so in a nice orderly fashion, we're all gonna go over here to the grandstand. Hey, come on, you know, I want to keep slaying, but...
They're clearing everyone from the speedway grounds. All the stages are shut down. So apparently there was some kind of weather emergency, heavy wind conditions, so they evacuated everyone and moved everyone to the seating area. It was actually pretty impressive, the full-scale evacuation, the level of response that was being implemented. And I could tell, based on what was happening, that Insomniac Productions, they were well prepared and they were trying to avoid the type of issues that they had experienced recently.
Did you guys go to EDC in LA?
Yeah.
You did? Did you guys ever go to EDC in LA?
No.
Anyone ever been to the one in LA?
Yeah.
Hey, who went to EDC LA? Who went to LA? Do you guys want to be in a documentary about EDC? I went to EDC in LA. About EDC.
LA.
Yeah, so it's about the last EDC that was in LA.
Oh, we could all talk about the last EDC that was in LA.
I'll talk about it because we're all there.
My favorite part was the people. I feel like California people are laid back, they're chill. The majority of the people were just chill and they were laid back and they were all there and they're welcoming you into their city.
It was still pretty amazing back then. At the LA Coliseum, it was just great. I mean, you get the same experience. You walk in and then the huge Coliseum is just a sea of people, stages surrounded. It's just like different kinds of music everywhere you go. You know, if you're into electronic music, it's one of the most beautiful experiences.
Literally, as soon as you pulled like within 5 miles of the stadium, you could just like feel the energy. And if people came here and experienced it firsthand, they would realize that it's not nearly the catastrophe that they want to make it out to be.
The news media had a bigger influence than any other reason that went into EDC leaving Los Angeles?
I definitely think they blew it out of proportion.
I think the media in general, as their job is kind of to blow things out of proportion to attract people's attention. I do think what happened wasn't necessarily a positive thing. I don't think it looked good on Insomniac because, of course, they could have paid more people more security to take care of those certain issues. But I think it was a little bit blown out of proportion because Insomniac can't necessarily.
It is called the Electric Daisy Carnival, and it is one of dance music's biggest parties. But now paramedics say that many people there are partying a little too hard.
We're hearing about 300 complaints have been called into the LAPD for noise.
It's a disaster, you know what? Because a lot of trash.
We've had to call the ambulance because they're passed out in the restroom.
Sales of narcotics, possession of narcotics, trespass.
Looks like it's out of control. You see people knocking down fences, taking all kinds of drugs and creating all kinds of problems.
The head of the LA Coliseum Commission is placing a temporary ban on raves.
More than 200 were injured over 2 days.
130 transports overloading emergency rooms.
Who's responsible for the rampant drug use and violence during the 2 days?
Some scenes so shocking and bloody. So many casualties from this event, the horror of the weekend rave at the Coliseum.
EDC is a 14-year tradition that some say needs to end.
Right about when the internet was new, I heard about this thing called a rave that was this party that was supposed to be the best party ever with a music that didn't really exist yet. Like at the time a lot of people were listening to punk music or grunge, but nobody really knew what techno was.
The way it happened is that I came from Europe where you hear electronic music everywhere, and so when I moved to the States, I was wondering where can I go listen to this kind of music.
A lot of the really good R&B groups from the 80s and the early 90s, and I grew up with that. But as I grew older, I discovered techno music through video games. I'm playing this game called Wipeout XL, and their soundtrack had The Prodigy, Future Sounds of London, Josh Swing. So I played more video games, and their sound kind of marinated into my head. It's like, this is what I like, I want to go find it.
Because I used to listen to mixtapes, and I'd sit there and I'd listen to, like somebody on a mixtape, like J Magic or Capital J or DJ SS or one of these DJs, and I'd see him on a flyer. And I'd be like, what? Dude, I have to go to see that guy play live, you know what I mean?
Well, before I was going to raves, I would listen to electronic music, and I didn't know there was a whole scene behind it. And so when I found that out, I was really excited.
When I first thought about moving to LA, the motivation was to go to school at University of Southern California. I was an undergrad in the Bay Area at the time, and I thought about moving to LA to pursue a grad program, the film program at USC. So I went down there just to visit the campus for the first time. So it was this private school located right there in south of downtown LA. It's one of the most prestigious colleges in the country. You know, at that time, I wasn't even aware of all the rich history behind the campus, specifically the areas surrounding the campus, such as Exposition Park, the Memorial Coliseum. You know, the Coliseum is a home of the USC Trojans, and the LA Sports Arena. You know, the Sports Arena, they've held many events there, such as the 1960 Democratic National Convention.
And we shall win!
This whole area, Sports Arena and Coliseum, they held the Olympics there twice.
The flags of all the nations competing in these games.
It was held there in 1932 and 1984. And then starting in 1997, for nearly a decade and a half after that, this was also the location where some of the country's biggest electronic music gatherings were held. So I never became a student at USC. I didn't enter the grad program, but I ended up becoming a part of the history of this venue in a very different way. A couple miles away, just outside the USC campus, there's another venue called the LA Shrine Auditorium. In 1997, the same year that the Coliseum and Sports Arena started holding raves, the Shrine Auditorium held a party called Electric Daisy Carnival. It was the first Electric Daisy Carnival held by Insomniac Productions.
It was a great party. I would say there was maybe, 5,000 people there. Obviously, I wasn't thinking that night this was going to become 200,000 person, music festival.
Insomniac started doing it every year after that. The theme was electronic music DJs combined with carnival attractions, and they would hold it at different venues throughout Southern California.
We're out here in the middle of the desert. This is right off the freeway. At Lake Dolores, the 1999 location of Electric Daisy Carnival. They only had the party here once. I have the old flyer. It seemed like a bunch of outcasts meeting up to all hang out together and to have a good time and not worry about fitting in.
Welcome to Electric Daisy Carnival.
This party's cool because you got like San Francisco and you got Southern California in it at the same time, We're right here in the middle, so you got both sides uniting together.
EDC, it hasn't been like since '97, a steady growth. It was just kind of something that happened every year. From what I remember, it was chilled around 5,000 people, maybe a year here or there would get 10,000.
Dropping Daisy. Woo!
This went on, and then in 2007, that's when Insomniac brought EDC to the Coliseum. And that also happened to be my first year partying at the Coliseum. Back then it was a one-day event, and I remember even towards the middle of the party, in the middle of the night, the sun's already gone down, there was still a lot of space to walk around in the main stage in the football stadium. Plenty of space to dance. But then you fast forward a few years later, EDC has become a lot more sophisticated, they have a bigger budget, they're doing more marketing.
We come together, united under the electric sky.
We are in EDC in Los Angeles. I've been around the world and I've never seen anything like this dedicated to dance music. I've been to Glastonbury. I've been to motherfucking Coachella, I've been to fucking Brazil, I've been to fucking Canada and Australia and New Zealand, but there's nothing like this in the world dedicated to dance music.
By 2010, you have a situation where, it's a 2-day event. On the second day, the sun hasn't even gone down yet. It's probably like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And the main stadium, the football stadium, the whole dance floor was already packed. They weren't allowing any more people in. So that's how many people are showing up now.
And everybody was surprised, and since then it's just grown.
Watching all this, and you're just wondering, how much longer can this venue hold EDC, or hold any type of party that's attracting this many people? Is this some kind of bubble that's gonna burst? That's kind of what I was going through my mind at the time.
Massive!
Hey, did you guys go to EDC by any chance? Did you guys go to EDC?
Last year.
EDC I did!
You did?
EDC this year?
Yeah.
My life.
During the summer and fall of 2010, I went out to the Coliseum and Sports Arena. I really wanted to meet some of the electronic music fans in and around LA who are going to the Coliseum and Sports Arena. I really got the opportunity to capture what they were thinking and feeling. That was really a critical time to kind of meet and talk to some of the last ravers who had a chance to party at this venue.
park in the front, we come out the back, and we go out the back.
Hey, my name is Brandon. Like, I've been going to raves off and on since I was maybe 14, 15. So I'm 27, so 13 years.
And I'm Dominic. I'm 28, and I've been going to raves for 14 years.
What do you guys love about it so much that's kept you going for so many years?
For me, it's been the spirituality of it. You know, it's so much. We used to joke around how it was like a religious cult. Bass was God, DJs were the prophets, vinyl was the Bible, our form of worship was dance and everything. And that's the way it felt for me a lot. You know, I'd go in and I'd just get in the midst of the crowd and lose myself in the vibe and the music, you know?
People know what disco's like and how great that era was. That's what this is to us, but in a much more loud way.
I'm passionate for the music. I love the music. I can't see it without it. This music makes you actually feel for something. With electronic music, you can like let your mind just spawn on whatever it wants it to be about. Your mind could just go whatever the song wants to be about.
It's just happy beats that just make you want to dance for hours.
So you're all not from LA?
No.
Okay.
We live in Arizona.
Tell me what brings you to LA parties.
It seems like it's almost more drug saturated in Arizona, and in LA, the LA scene, I feel like, is more about the vibe and more about the people.
I'm a Midwestern kid. I'm originally from Indiana, so I've been to like the huge old Chicago massive scene where it was like 25,000 kids every weekend. But yeah, LA attracted me because it's a colorful scene. People actually come out to party. People dress up. People get prepared for it.
I'm from the Bay Area, San Jose. This is like my first massive in LA. I decided I had to go and I was going to do whatever it takes to go to this.
They're DJs that have been playing in LA forever. Here's where you come to see some of the biggest DJs.
Laid Back Luke, Deadmau5, Swedish House Mafia, Benazi, Boys Noise, Doug Sauce, Mastercraft, Wolfgang, Afrojack. Oh, it was too much.
I'm from San Luis Obispo, and we have like really small shows, but coming to something like this is way different. I drove about 3.5 hours today, and I do it a lot. It's worth it to me.
Because in Arizona, the scene is very much, you see a lot of the same people over and over again. Out here, it gives you the variety to meet hundreds to like thousands of people, like different that you would never be able to see before. And after time, the friends that you make, you just like get closer and closer every time.
People just come here and they can just be free. There's no judging people. People are just open about who they are.
The environment, everybody's just really nice and loving, and it's like one giant family.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Everybody's like so friendly. There's never drama, and like it's just so much fun. Like it's a good vibe.
It's like my passion, I think I would say. You know, every time I go to a rave, I just feel more like I'm at home.
So yeah, that's just what kept me going for 14 years and probably going to keep me going for the rest of my life.
This is my DARE certificate. I got it in the 6th grade. I was so proud when I got it. We had a cop come into our classroom every Friday afternoon and teach us basically 20 different ways to just say no to drugs. Now remember, the police officer is the same person that's going to arrest you if you're on drugs. So that concept of punishment and being a suspect in criminal justice, that was the only concept of drug education that I ever understood growing up. And that's the way it was until a year and a half after I started going to raves.
It's an adult screening test for ecstasy. You can tell if, it actually is MDMA or if there's speed or LSD or...
It was the summer of 2000. I was at a free party at Golden Gate Park. There was a table set up by a group called DanceSafe, so I go up and check it out. They were doing some kind of on-site pill adulterant testing. They had a lot of information they were passing out. They had this white pamphlet they were passing out on 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine. So that was my first time learning what MDMA was, a chemical name for ecstasy. But there was one card that really stood out to me. It was a card on something called harm reduction. And I just remember picking it up, I started reading it, and I started thinking to myself, what is this?
Harm reduction as an effective public health intervention, it's really a strategy that helps to reduce some of the consequences that can be associated with drug use. For example, disease transmission for people who might share syringes, preventing fatal overdose. In terms of being a philosophy, it's a way of working with drug users that really maximizes their dignity and their autonomy and their self-respect by not forcing our own morality upon them. We're not going to be able to eliminate 100% of drug and alcohol use 100% of the time. The harm reduction perspective that the best way to keep young people safe is to give them the information they need to be safe.
And that made perfect sense to me. I felt like there was nothing complex or controversial about it. So 2 weeks later, I'm at my first harm reduction training, and the 2020 news crew was there that day. I think it was my second or third weekend volunteering for DanceSafe, and we brought 2020 with us.
The ecstasy user hands over his or her pill for a quick analysis. If the pill changes color immediately to dark purple or black, then it's tested positive for the presence of ecstasy. But no matter what these testers find, remember the pill is always handed back to the user. DanceSafe does this right out in the open.
And then all of a sudden we're on national TV, and it was all kind of happening really fast for me. My initial impression with DanceSafe was that I was just gonna do some volunteer work for the summer. I had no idea that by joining DanceSafe, I was actually diving straight into the middle of a national debate.
Ecstasy is not a new drug. What is new is the sudden increase of ecstasy users.
It's being sold from Main Street to Wall Street, from high schools to the Silicon Valley.
In just 1 year, seizures of ecstasy coming into the U.S. increased tenfold, from 1.2 million tablets in 1998 to 12.1 million in 1999.
All of a sudden, there were like 1 million Americans who had used MDMA in the past year, and that was unprecedented. And nobody really knew what this drug was, other than like the occasional mention on like Beverly Hills 90210 and stuff. So you had this rapid rise in use, primarily by suddenly by younger kids.
The home-based warehouse in Oakland in many ways is where DanceSafe got its start. They were the first masses that we went to, where there was a lot of people, including minors, on MDMA and other drugs. A lot of young people come from the suburbs, a lot of teenagers, second time ever at a rave, taking MDMA for the first time, or ecstasy, whatever they thought it was. They would list off whatever drugs they knew, heroin, cocaine. They really thought that they were taking pills that had a mixture of different drugs, and some of them made you feel good and some of them, depending on the combination. They'd never even heard of MDMA. So it was at the home base warehouse where I realized I needed to create a pamphlet that explains what ecstasy really is.
And then an ecstasy user, 3 weeks after the last time that person used ecstasy.
Meanwhile, even though we were never taught anything about MDMA by the DARE program, now the National Institute on Drug Abuse was very busy warning America about ecstasy.
The brain of a normal individual, and what we're measuring here is the ability to use serotonin in the brain. And the former ecstasy user has a persistent, long-lasting decrease in the brain's ability to use this crucial chemical.
NIDA was promoting the results of this study, and it was part of a broader government effort to establish MDMA as the #1 most dangerous drug.
I get a call from 60 Minutes and Dateline on the same day wanting to do stories about DanceSafe. They just received a press release from the DEA. This is going to be their anti-ecstasy demon drug story. They wanted to get footage of the drug in a rave because the DEA press release was very clear that they were trying to target this music culture, and they did that through this demonization campaign. But DanceSafe got itself injected into that campaign, and that after that, DanceSafe was in MTV, 2020, Geraldo, Time, Newsweek, Playboy, Cosmo. Harm reduction got a gigantic boost because of this.
Information about ecstasy was very, very prevalent just on the news and just in general. It was just the height of everything when you'd see on news broadcasts like of dehydration of ecstasy. So it was common information.
E causes the body temperature to rise. Profuse sweating and dehydration are common side effects. Bottled water is a hot commodity at raves.
Whenever I would see on TV any segment about MDMA and dehydration, it was always about ravers sweating and dancing and having to drink lots of water.
Causing the body to dehydrate and overheat. Users have to drink a lot of water.
It wasn't until DanceSafe got into the picture, when Emmanuel appeared on MTV, that people started to think about the other issue of overhydration.
Not true. Water won't bring you down from an ecstasy experience. It will only rehydrate you. And so now the standard line is drink water, but not too much water.
Drink water, but not too much water. After people saw and heard Emmanuel saying it, other experts started looking into the issue. And I would notice that we ended up influencing reporters to start talking about the topic in detail.
Now, dehydration is key here, especially at raves where partygoers are often encouraged to drink liquids, but those can also cause problems. It can cause low blood salt, which can lead to seizures and even a coma. So the bottom line here...
I think that we influenced the conversation greatly because we're people from, the scene, from the rave scene, saying, yeah, don't drink too much water. Don't, make sure you do drink water. Don't overheat. We're the only people saying what the true risks of sort of the lifestyle were.
Duct tape is the greatest substance in the world.
You know, there are people who would say the really responsible thing to do is to take that pill away from them regardless of what's in it.
Right. Not at all. Okay, they come to the table, they go, can you test this? And you go, nope. And you take it and you put it in your pocket or you throw it away. They then pull another 20 out of the pocket, go buy another pill and take it. Doesn't help a thing.
Why was the ecstasy testing and ecstasy adulteration such a big part of this story?
Because kids were suddenly dying.
He's not breathing? How do you know about the drug, the ecstasy?
Because I know that's what he took. He told us.
So all of a sudden, there was this rash of deaths because of these adulterated pills.
The drug that killed her, the drug everyone thought was ecstasy, wasn't ecstasy at all. It was PMA, paramethoxyamphetamine.
2 young men died today after a night of partying at an Orlando rave club.
All summer long, young people began dying. 6 in 2 months. A PMA epidemic. But how can you keep kids from taking fake ecstasy when you can't seem to stop them from taking the real thing? So far, the only suggestion comes from a group of young activists.
Even though we were controversial, even though we were unconventional, journalists knew that they had to be open to new ideas.
Is DanceSafe really doing what it claims?
Even though they criticized us, they also had to recognize that in areas where other experts had run out of answers, DanceSafe was the only group that was offering an immediate and effective solution.
A lot of times when we're here, people selling bunk pills won't sell. They'll leave.
I've tested personally 600-700 pills for people. I have never seen anyone consume a tablet after I told them it did not contain ecstasy.
We heard from Jenny the next day. She's okay, as was everyone at that rave. Proof, DanceSafe says, that their test saves lives.
And it was very important for harm reduction to get its voice out there because we were fighting against an environment of misinformation, of bad reporting, and of bad science.
There are testing kits out there that you can test your ecstasy to make sure it's MDMA and not the dangerous, the really dangerous things like
There's
DXM.
a testing kit.
There is a testing kit. I kind of take the harm prevention approach, which is, I know you're going to do it. We know kids are going to do it. why not get them educated about it? I mean, they really don't have any idea what it's about, and they're taking these drugs from people they don't know.
Well, wouldn't we want kids not to do? I'm thinking.
I'm not saying that they should do it.
I'm looking at the holes in her brain.
Right. It's very dangerous.
See what look like holes in different little areas here. That
They
those are
took this girl who ostensibly did a lot of MDMA and did a brain scan to show rates of blood flow, and then they turned the contrast up so that it appeared like she had golf ball size holes all throughout her brain.
Look how almost moth-eaten it looks there.
And they told her and the audience that these were actually holes in her brain and that her ecstasy use had done this to her.
Because I was reading some reports about how this really, for some kids, it has the same effect as Alzheimer's does on, older
This young woman in her brain scan, in combination with the research results from NIDA, it was all one big campaign to try to convince the public that MDMA was to blame for destroying the teenagers of America.
I never heard of anyone getting hurt by ecstasy.
It led her to cocaine, crack, heroin.
And ecstasy took me down a deadly, destructive path I could never have imagined.
Now, a few years down the line, it would be revealed that the government studies suggesting how deadly MDMA was, those studies turned out to be completely unreliable.
One of the country's leading researchers into the effects of the drug ecstasy has admitted a major flaw in his research. Dr. George Riccardi of Johns Hopkins University has retracted a study published last year which claimed that a single night of using ecstasy can cause serious brain damage and even Parkinson's disease. Dr. Riccardi admitted he mistakenly gave methamphetamine, a far more toxic substance than ecstasy, to the monkeys he used in the study.
So the truth did come out eventually, but I felt by that time it was already too late because the damage had already been done. Many influential people were already led to believe that MDMA was too deadly and there would be no way that America could minimize the harms. And in the end, I think it was this type of perspective that ultimately had the biggest impact on public policy, especially policy at the national level.
Rave Act essentially alters the crack house statute in the Controlled Substances Act. And what it does is it allows law enforcement and prosecutors to easily go after promoters and venue owners for any sort of drugs that are being sold or being used at their events.
It included a provision that had civil penalties for club owners, promoters, event coordinators, anyone that was involved in throwing a dance music event, whether it was a rave or an every week club.
They had an altruistic goal, which is essentially to ensure that ecstasy users and other people at these venues aren't harmed as a result of drug use. But in the end, promoters and venue owners no longer want to have organizations that actually provide harm reduction resources, because those organizations and those individuals could be used as evidence that the owners or the promoters were aware that drug use was going to happen at their event.
I went to these promoters meetings and said, we exist, we have this really useful service. You don't want people dying at your events. We don't want people dying in general. Why don't we work together? And they said, no, can't have this. It admits to drug use. It's, I agree with your mission, but I'm not going to actually let you put it into action.
It's been such a, a liability. From a legal standpoint, nobody had the guts to, kind of try to activate these harm reduction sorts of programs, because it could potentially make you more liable than, complete deniability.
As far as providing drug education. So far with the Rave Act in place, everybody's been afraid that just providing information would lead to some sort of a prosecution.
The ironic part is that the Rave Act was theoretically supposed to stop the spread of MDMA. And in 2003, MDMA use in America was actually on the decline. But ever since then, it started going back up. And for the rest of that decade, it kept going and going. So we ended up with a formula of MDMA use constantly going up in combination with access and awareness of harm reduction going down. The problem became so severe that Los Angeles County decided to conduct a case study, on a New Year's Eve event at the LA Sports Arena. So they had researchers from different agencies look at the hospital transports from this event and compare it to citywide, statewide, and nationwide stats. And the final recommendation from the study was that culturally appropriate strategies needed to be deployed. Now, I always interpreted culturally appropriate as kind of their way of saying harm reduction without actually using the term harm reduction. And I think if this study had been released and implemented a few years earlier, then things would have turned out differently. But as it stands, this research wasn't even done until 2010, and this recommendation wasn't published until 2 weeks before Electric Daisy Carnival.
Oh, what up? Oh, yeah.
Well, over 100,000 people are expected to grab their glow sticks and head to Exposition Park this weekend. It's for one of the world's biggest dance music festivals, and Dave Malkoff joins us live from the Electric Daisy Carnival. Dave.
Yeah, the daisies are electric in there. Let me take you inside so you can see what's happening. We're outside, but this is as far as you can get being the news media.
On that Friday, on that first day of EDC, KTLA News was outside the Coliseum trying to get inside the event. They had a reporter that seemed to be very energetic and was going around everywhere interviewing all the attendees, and he was hitting it off with many of the ravers he was interviewing.
Am I too nerdy to get inside?
No, you're sexy, baby.
I am?
So it was definitely a positive focus, and that wasn't necessary because they couldn't find anything bad to report on. There were certainly problems happening right in front of them.
Yeah, you keep on dancing until you end up in the ambulance. Every once in a while, they're pulling people out of here. So a little too much partying for some people, but other people, they're having fun, right?
Yes!
Fantastic.
And yet they're still smiling and dancing and celebrating EDC. So for a reporter like this, who's clearly very friendly, they're putting a positive spin on EDC and the Coliseum, you would think that there wouldn't be any reservations with letting them in, right?
No news cameras are allowed inside at all.
But they weren't allowed in. There were no news reporters that were allowed inside EDC. And you might wonder, why did they have such heavy policies against the news media? And you would understand why if you pay attention to how the media reacted to the turn of events on the second day of EDC.
That's for sure. What do you think, Vera?
Oh my God, did you hear him? You're sexy, baby.
She was totally hitting on him.
She was. I love that.
The second day, you can tell the vibe was a little bit different. You know, people were more, less excited for like the start of EDC and more sort of like in the mix of EDC. They were like, okay, here we are, here we go. For me and my friends in particular, we literally walked in and I said, guys, we're going straight to the main stage. The football stadium, the ground area where the football field is one big stage. So that's one like big mega rock concert. Now imagine that you can leave the rock concert and go out to where those concession stands are, and there's 3 or 4 more stages surrounding the area. And it's gotten to the point now where they've expanded not only just the outside of the Coliseum, but they have an entire other section called Exposition Park, where they have another huge, massive stage. We literally walked in and went straight to the main stage, and there was a huge fucking line. Like here's the best way to describe it is like a circle, right? Here's the Coliseum, and then they were only letting people in on there was only one way in. One way in and then 2 ways out. Whereas in the past, they had all the sides open. So this time around, it was 1 way in and 2 ways out. But the problem was that they were only letting VIPs go in and out of the Coliseum, whereas general admission would have to get cut off and wait. So naturally, people who are seeing this are not gonna leave that area because they don't want to get stuck having to wait in that line again. And sure enough, that line to get into the Coliseum was a nightmare. So we literally just got in the huge ass line, and once we got in, it was just such a difficult thing to deal with because they didn't have any bathrooms. You know, they didn't have any, like, there was no opportunity to get like free water from like a bathroom sink or something like that. Our friends were like fighting amongst each other because some of them were just like, screw it, let's just leave and go see. It's better to go see 4 of my favorite DJs on 3 different stages than sitting here and waiting for like one big DJ. You know, so it was just dealing with all these different things. You know, there was no place to go to the bathroom, so what happened was people were peeing and pooping all over the place. You know, some girl asked me and my friends to make a little wall, so we literally just made like a human wall with like, you know, 4 or 5 other dudes, and she just sat in the middle of the wall and just took a poop, you know, and like, yeah, it's just gross. But that was sort of the scene, you know, it was people who were fucking starving, people who were extremely dehydrated, you know, no place to go to the bathroom, really frustrated, you know, and it just sort of sets up this sort of chaos. And then of course there was the bum rushing. You know, like literally just like floods of people bum rushing their way in. They had the main stage here, and then surrounding the entire area was entrances, like a football stadium. And at each one of those entrances, they had a gate, you know, like a fence gate, and they had 2 security guards, and then security guards lining the walls of the Coliseum.
Los Angeles, stop the fence jumping. You're gonna hurt yourselves. The party will be stopped. Stop now. For all these people who came here in the name of love and light, Los Angeles, tell them.
They had 2 anywhere from like 5 to 8 foot fences, chain link fences. So in other words, if you wanted to jump over these fences, you had to run down the bleachers, climb, hop over one fence, and then run, and then climb and hop over another fence, and then make it into the Coliseum. And it was literally like a dogfight. It was literally like Ravers versus security guards, Ravers versus cops.
Okay, motherfuckers. We looking at everybody jumping over the motherfucking fences. You need to fucking stop. If you see a motherfucker going toward the fence, they look like they're gonna go over the fence, you pull that motherfucker down. Everybody down here pay money to fucking party. You motherfuckers is fucking up the party.
How many hours were you and your friends actually on the field? Did you guys stay there all night?
We stayed there all night. We were there for 12 hours. We didn't leave. We didn't see any other artists. We just saw the main stage artists.
So did you pee or eat or?
I peed on the wall. I didn't eat anything. I survived off like ice. You know, I asked the vendors, I'm like, please fill this cup up with ice, or I just bummed water off other people. One of my friends bought a bunch of water. He spent like 50 bucks on water, so we just, you know, we pulled through with that. But yeah, it was a battle, man. It was really, you know, and that night was like the night that we wanted to roll extra hard, so I think I took like 3 pills or something like that. You know, but overall though, I mean, I really, like when it boils down to it, all that stuff that I went through was worth every penny, every second, because that moment, being there, was just, to me, in the 10 years that I've been going to parties, is definitely up there with the top 5. You know, just that stage, the way that they had the setup, and the stage, and the lighting, and the sound quality, was just absolutely brilliant. I mean, it was just nothing else like it. I don't know, you know, who knows if there'll ever be anything else like it ever again.
unbelievable sight. You can hear and see that there's a rave in the middle of the city. Hundreds of LAPD officers are here to control the crowd. Now this rave, this party here at the Coliseum, doesn't end until 2 in the morning. The street right here, which is King, has been shut down.
On the second night of Electric Daisy Carnival, KTLA was outside again, and this time the tone of the coverage was the complete opposite of the night before. It flipped a complete 180.
Standing by with such a large gathering of people, now you're bound to have some problems.
They were pointing out every single issue they could find with EDC.
And how can you forget about the piles of trash left behind?
Last night I couldn't sleep.
And at first it seemed like most of the issues were quite trivial.
Decibel levels.
But as the hours and the days pass, other channels and other newspapers also cover EDC. And then the problems that were being raised seemed to become more and more serious. And I believe it was around Monday when the tone escalated even further, once all the footage started to appear on YouTube.
Gate jumpers, and when I was there, I was at the Coliseum floor. I remember coming down from VIP onto the floor, and in all my years attending EDC, I had never seen anything like that. It went on YouTube. Of course, everybody had their, cell phone out, video camera out, and they started recording it, putting it on YouTube. From YouTube, the news stories got a hold of it, and then they blew up.
Now imagine that you're a journalist in Los Angeles, and there's a message that Electric Daisy Carnival was an out-of-control party. That's the story that you're trying to put together. And then suddenly on this free platform, YouTube, dozens, maybe hundreds of videos start popping up that show that exact message. This was literally a jackpot for reporters.
Video of the crushing crowds are out on YouTube.
Because the narrative that was being framed, it was a lot easier to frame it because there were so many images, so much visual material to support that narrative. So access to that type of material, visual materials, was why EDC made such a good story. And it brought up the question about whether the incidents that happened at EDC, were they unique? Have they happened at other events in the recent past?
We're here at Monster Massive 2010, and there's been no drama. And last year in 2009, we waited 3 hours in line. People were fucking picking up fences to cut. People were pushing. I almost got trampled. My friend almost got trampled and almost, he was
basically, I was over the rave.
And I was over the rave.
I was over the rave by the time we got in front of the line.
I was in front of the line, and I was like, you know what, fuck it.
I'm curious, why do you think the news media went after EDC instead of, for example, Monster Massive?
Because no one died at Monster Massive. There was a lot of chaos, but there was no one died.
Just to recap for you, this girl went to the Electric Daisy Carnival. It's called EDC for short. She was one of 185,000 young people and adults to attend this over 2 days. Her family, a local family, made the decision sometime between 5 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. to take her off life support.
She was in critical condition on arrival. She was apparently found unresponsive at the event. Blood pressure was low. Her oxygen level was low. Her sodium level was very low. She was in a coma. She was in respiratory failure. She was put onto life support immediately, but her brain never recovered from the insult.
She's been hospitalized after a suspected drug overdose.
15-year-old girl died of a suspected drug overdose.
A 15-year-old girl has died of a suspected drug overdose.
Names started being released, her age came out. The fact that she was 15, this is going to be a problem, is because there was supposed to be a 16 over age limit. That was the major fallout that caused big news companies to latch onto it. She was not supposed to be there.
Suspected drug overdose of a 15-year-old girl when even the admission age to the Coliseum was supposed to be 16 years old. And we did try to get someone from the festival on, from one of the promoters, to speak with us and couldn't get anybody.
EDC's promoter, Insomniac Events, hasn't responded to interview requests, just releasing this statement. We are currently reviewing the entire event.
For them to allow this to happen knowing that 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds are getting in, they're drinking, they're using drugs, and the county knows it's happening, and yet they keep approving it. It's just, something doesn't feel right.
These are clearly different from other rock concerts and rock shows. The only time I've seen patients with this level of drug intoxication is during the nights of these raves.
The teen's death puts music festivals like this one in the hot seat and the drug ecstasy in the spotlight.
Ecstasy overdoses. If the patient's here just with electrolyte abnormalities, we can fix those. Their temperatures are really high. We do our best to try and cool them. But in case we can't always fix it. Sometimes
parents all across the Southland justifiably concerned about the safety of their own teenagers.
We need to do more to, really to protect our kids.
Parents see these kinds of stories and assume that if it's being printed in a credible location, like for example the LA Times, it must be that the doctors who are being questioned have read all of the files and everything must be accurate. Parents can read these stories and assume that, well, my goodness, that must mean that ecstasy kills young people, that must mean it's available at these dance parties.
Dad, Edward Lizama, he says he had no idea what his 16-year-old daughter was getting into Saturday night. He thought Electric Daisy would be a routine concert.
Letting all the parents know like what really happens on raves, because a lot of parents don't know. So I remember when I first started going to like raves, I used to tell my parents I was going to concerts, and like they would believe that. But like now, like they know, like well, not because of EDC, like they now know what a rave is.
Did you see any of the things that they reported on the news about at EDC?
I didn't at all, but my mom did. She just told me to be careful. My mom saw that the girl died. She just didn't really want me to come anymore.
How did you hear about the stuff that happened at EDC if you didn't go yourself?
Actually, I heard about it from my parents. My dad, he thought it was just this big, massive party, just this big, out of control, no limits party, and he just wanted to make sure I wasn't involved in anything like that.
When an incident or tragedy occurs and there's a lot of publicity around it and it affects many people's lives, it tends to permanently redefine rave culture and a lot of the issues that we associate with rave culture. So this happens about once every 5 or 10 years in the United States, and Electric Daisy Carnival was that type of event. It was one of the last major events in US history that changed the public perception of what we understand to be electronic music culture. Because in 2010, everyone was still sort of living in this old school mentality that a lot of issues that we were struggling with are only attached to these renegade, illegal, underground warehouse parties where there's no regulation and no rules. Ever since then, we've transitioned into this new era where we kind of see that many of the issues are still very relevant in this age of commercial festivals with large-scale budgets and seemingly unlimited regulations and resources.
Had more police officers, narcotics officers, uniform officers, vice officers than they've ever had at the EDC before.
Even though there were police, paramedics, and private security.
Had more fire engines and more paramedics still, and yet this happened.
People who are defending these big parties are saying they're safer than small parties. Let's look at that. Is it true? It's not true. It's absolutely untrue. And so, I talked to people who were able to say, no, not really. I've never heard of a death. I talk to people at emergency rooms in this area who say, I never see ecstasy overdoses, literally. Directors of ER rooms saying they never see ecstasy overdoses except when there are raves here at the Coliseum and the sports arena.
When I met Dennis Romero, he wouldn't sign his birth date.
I just don't want people knowing. You can look stuff up with your birth date.
He had received threats online, apparently from electronic music fans who were upset over his articles.
Oh, somebody said that people should find out where I live and throw rocks at my house and my cars. So even though I might like the music and the culture, I have to do this part, warning people about things and making sure they know full well what their public officials are up to. That's the role of a journalist.
Have you been able to figure out why they're coming mostly or exclusively from events at the Coliseum?
No, I mean, that's hard to do. But here's the deal. When you have a huge party with all that talent, it attracts people. And what happens is those kids, what are they doing? They're saving up their money, they're saving up their hopes and their party juice, and they are gonna fucking rage on this weekend because they've been waiting for this one event. And the people who are letting this happen are politicians who we vote for. The Coliseum makes 28% of its annual revenue off of raves. So you've got to consider that that's weighing in on whether or not these politicians want to allow these things to happen. I want you to know that. Am I trying to shut down raves? Am I a bad person for letting you know? Should we not tell people the truth? People say, why don't you write positively? I would ask, what's the story? What's the positive story that you want to see about these parties? And who would read that? That's the problem, raves are great, okay? Breaking news, The world doesn't work that way, and it's not my fault. But we don't say everything's good, let's write about that. What we do, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And as journalists, particularly now when we have less and less resources, we focus on things that need help. We focus on things that have problems. And I would argue that raves have had problems.
So I saw the autopsy report of this young woman who died at the EDC in 2010, and it's very clear that she died from hyponatremia. All the hallmarks are there, low sodium levels and coma. She probably drank too much water, and that's a risk. Salt starts leaving your body's cells and it desalinates. The electrical signals can't get processed. Her blood levels were somewhere between 0.12 and 0.17 micrograms per milliliter. That's extremely low compared to cases, the fatalities where we know that 1 microgram per milliliter, we know in one case the person took 250 milligrams of MDMA, which is quite a large dose. In the case of this 2010 EDC death, the young woman had 1/10 the amount. I know the media called this death an ecstasy overdose. Calling it an overdose characterizes the person who died as someone who was pushing their limits, chasing the high, trying to take more and more and more, as if they were just irresponsible users. They overdose. It allows the toxicologist, the author, the reporter, the club owner, the festival promoter, to avoid their own responsibility in these fatalities.
So you would tell kids to go to a rave or not to go? Or
After EDC 2010, the conversation that was circulating in the media, it was the typical debate over whether or not we should just get rid of raves entirely.
The question remains, should large-scale commercialized raves such as the Electric Daisy Carnival be permanently banned?
That was normally the question that would come up in any city or any community that had recently experienced an MDMA-related death. But as I started to pay attention to the type of people that were being featured in these conversations,
they provide an amazing outlet for a vast subculture in America and all over the world. They're not going to happen legally, it's going to be much more dangerous.
The county's director of public health already has some of his recommendations.
And that's when I slowly realized that there was something different happening. LA County was developing something that I had not anticipated. In all my years of working in harm reduction, I had never seen what was about to happen next.
Ever since EDC happened, things changed, but they shouldn't have to change. They should have just updated the rules a little.
County Board of Supervisors are 5 members that run about 8 to 10 million people that live in the county, 58 cities. They set a task force up to look at electronic concerts.
A task force was convened to get the people who actually had the expertise to craft a response to how to handle drug use at these kinds of events.
After EDC, they were overwhelmed with the numbers of patients, the numbers of off-site transports. When the 911 system is called, the paramedic gets there and assesses the patient. If they're altered or confused, they have to go to the hospital. They don't have on-site nurses or doctors. Part of the job of the RAVE task force was to look into this and say, hey, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong?
So as part of my work with Drug Policy Alliance, we did a series of conferences called New Directions, which was specifically about kind of building a public health approach to drug policy. So this task force being run by the Department of Public Health in LA, this is great news, and this is unlike anything that's happening anywhere else in the country.
Harm reductionists were being actively invited to that table, and members of the dance community were being actively invited to that discussion.
These individuals could both inform the rest of the group about the realities of the electronic music event industry and help the task force with outreach.
This really was a totally new way of responding to a problem related to people using drugs.
And so the end result was a group of recommendations to ensure that there were certain guidelines for promoters and certain expectations from those who were allowing the event to go forward. We're going to make sure there should be an age limit, 18. There should be no one admitted without picture identification.
And
There's different work groups, and they all have the mission to improve the safety, but through their particular expertise. So there's a public education work group, and there's a harm reduction work group.
There's now this open dialogue within the RAVE task force about harm reduction. The fact that there is a harm reduction group is almost staggering, given the history of trying to integrate harm reduction into events.
Now harm reduction isn't a bad word anymore, and people are actually asking for it.
Mobile event safety support, and it looks like an ambulance, but it really isn't. What this has in it is everything that the ambulances don't have. Paramedics in California can't hand out Tylenols. It's outside their scope of practice. They're not allowed to suture in the field. We don't want to call it a hospital, but we call it a care center because it's more than first aid. We provide advanced level of care, but it allows us to set up a little mini care center basically anywhere we go to take care of a crowd of typically 50,000. The biggest thing from the medical side was having on-site nurses and doctors. For smaller events, you don't really need that. But when you're growing to a size of what EDC did, 100,000 or more people, you have to have it.
Working on a public service announcement that's going to feature a bunch of the famous DJs, a bunch of the DJs that performed at Electric Daisy Carnival, with a message, not of a don't do drugs message, but of kind of a more well-rounded harm reduction message, and hoping to create it in a format that'll actually be appealing to the audience that it's intended for.
I plan on bringing my neurobiology of drug abuse knowledge to the task force and help to develop some of the materials that we're going to use for public education. So things like what happens in the short run, what are the effects on the brain and the body. And I hope to bring my experience with DanceSafe and use some of the strategies that have been successful in the past, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, so we can just use them.
Among the most interesting of the recommendations was to distribute materials that would educate people attending the dance parties about how to be safe if they made the choice to use drugs, specifically ecstasy.
All right. My name is Omar de la Cruz. I'm with the San Fernando Valley Partnership. We are assisting the LA County Department of Health. The ecstasy usage in our community has been on the rise, so we're passing out these cards that talk about ecstasy and what are the signs and what they can do.
People come in and they say, hey, I took this blue pill, or I took this white pill with this logo on it. We don't know if it's 100% ecstasy, or we don't know if there's something else in it.
Okay, what are the effects? Effects felt within 20 to 40 minutes, peak within 1.5 hours, and subside after 3 to 5. So increases the heart rate, blood pressure, blood temperature, and muscle tension like teeth grinding.
MDMA simply releases the serotonin that you have built up naturally in your brain. And it takes a week or two to replenish that serotonin. During that time, you cannot redose with MDMA like you can with other drugs. With cocaine, with methamphetamine, with opiates, the more you do, the higher you get. And when you start to come down, you can just take more and get higher again. That does not work with MDMA. And if you continue to take more and you don't get high again, that leads some people to think, well, I just need to take even more. And now you get into dangerous levels of MDMA. But even a normal dose can kill you if you are not careful in the environment you take it. Overheating is the main risk, but drinking too much water, which often happens when a person starts getting too hot, is another risk.
It can cause severe hyponatremia, which is really low sodiums. And don't mix it with other stuff. You know, a lot of the patients that we end up seeing is because they're using ecstasy and they're combining it with something else, whether it's cocaine or alcohol. And when you get that additive effect, that's really when we get into a lot of the problems.
It should be don't take it all. Not how to minimize. Do not take. Stay hydrated. Drink beer.
I honestly think it's the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Why is it funny?
Because I mean, good for them telling us how to take ecstasy. I mean, might as well just hand it out to us in public. Honestly, I think it's a bad thing, but if anything, it's for the stupid idiots that don't know what they're doing, and it could be a good thing too.
I would have to respectfully disagree. I mean, I think if there's no hiding that people are going to take ecstasy. So the Department of Health, I think it's responsible for them to give important information on how to do it safely.
You know, when I was interviewing the attendees, and I would meet people who still seem to be comfortable only with the abstinence-based approach, or sometimes you'll meet people who kind of want to distance themselves from the population that might be using this information because they might think that this information is only for irresponsible or reckless people. That just sort of reminded me that this task force campaign, it's really a first step in regaining the trust of young people and getting them to feel comfortable with taking this information seriously and not feeling sort of threatened or alienated by the information. Because that's the type of reaction that young people have become accustomed to their whole lives.
The typical information that you get from government entities, the way that it's packaged means that users of that drug just kind of turn off from it because they're like, well, I've done it a million times and I'm fine. People are making a choice. We may not like their choice to use something, but given that they're going to do it, we need to make sure that it happens in the safest way possible, that they don't hurt themselves or others. So it's a crucial change in perspective. And that's really been the main challenge in getting harm reduction information out into the dance music community.
Honestly, this is a lot better than how the government usually handles it.
This is the first time I've seen people do give flyers up like this. I've never seen it on any event like this before.
This is not information that has been readily available in the past. So, just the fact that that's now part of the conversation, I think is a huge step forward culturally.
To have the Department of Public Health put their stamp of approval on this task force really represented to me a sea change in how the Department of Public Health approached the reality of drug use among young people in Los Angeles. It really represented a whole new way of thinking about and addressing that specific issue.
I don't think anyone had any great disagreement. The criteria were well thought out, and so the recommendations were endorsed by the county board and later adopted by the Coliseum Commission. The Coliseum Commission is a tri-party governmental agency that runs the Coliseum and the sports arena. There's representation from the state, the county, and the city of Los Angeles. One of the things that municipalities do is attract business. In this instance, the Coliseum is only used, you can plan on 6 to 8 games for the USC, a couple of soccer games per year. So it's a very light workload, so you're constantly looking for ways in which revenue can come in and help. This electronic concert is responsible for tens of millions of dollars of revenue. It brought the amount of people that traveled to the city from across the nation. We had international visitation and over 4,000 jobs, even though these may be once a year or twice a year jobs. Any loss of employment of individuals in the community adds to the unemployment rate, and particularly when there is nothing that comes behind it to take its place. So the revenue stream will be down significantly, and have nothing to replace it puts you in a quandary of how do you continually upgrade and keep the facility in a situation that's at least competitive when events want to come to the city of LA.
How you feeling, LA? You guys are beautiful! No other place in the world I'd rather be right here with you. Thank you. Everybody have a beautiful, safe 2011. Take care of each other. Together and one. Take it to the cars, everybody.
So I heard this is going to be the last rave at this venue. Is that true?
I really doubt it because they make so much money off it. I mean, think about it. I got at least $70 a pop. Every fucking person over here, 20, come on, multiply it and everything.
So you don't think the Coliseum
The Los Angeles is so damn broke.
You're calling their bluff?
Yeah, they make too much money. They're not gonna cut it. They can't.
Let me know when Gio's ready.
Yes, you could just sign this. You'll be around.
Well, we're at the LA Coliseum. This place is great. This place has been here for hundreds of years, about 100 years, I think, and it just, they need to throw more parties here. I think the city should lighten up on the rave scene. You know, it's not as bad as 10-4. I gotta go, guys. Sorry.
Copy that. No, man.
Thanks.
The next item is the review of plans for the proposed June 24 and 25 Electric Daisy Festival. We have representatives here, and we have as well. Patel, he's the president, owner of Insomniac.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Thank you all for being here. Okay. Electric Daisy Carnival has been called a lot of different things over the last 6 months, but let's take a moment to remember what it is. EDC is one of more than 25 large music festivals featuring electronic music. Other such festivals include the Detroit Electronic Music Festival with 95,000 people in attendance, Ultra Music Festival in Miami with 100,000 people in attendance, and Tomorrowland in Belgium with 90,000 people in attendance. The Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum and Exposition Park are the perfect venue for EDC because it's a unique, diverse outdoor space in the heart of Los Angeles. We have prepared this presentation for the Commission to review our request to produce EDC at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. Now let's get into the basics of the 2011 event plan. Pat Lidge.
These are the policies and procedures. We start first and foremost with the LA County Department of Health, the task force that we've been all working on. Attendees may remain on site in designated areas to cool down for at least an hour after 2 a.m. Our medical staff will remain on site as long as it's necessary to take care of up to that last patient. Fire department has set the maximum capacity to 75,000 guests per day. Now this is less than what we had last year. Harm reduction in the education area, a lot is being done here. You have a card in front of you right here where virtually everybody will get this as they come in. And this has been done in conjunction with the county health folks. And this is widely distributed.
And these cards are targeted towards those attending the events. I want to make that clear, not for the general public. So more harm reduction.
Right. On the medical side, safety of medical overview, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Granger.
I was called in as a medical expert because of my interest for the last 20 years, not only in staffing and working at big events, but also a lot of the research that we've published. When you look at mass gatherings, there's a lot of medical literature going back to the 1960s that looks at how many patients per 10,000 attendees. At marathons, they're way up over 100 patients per 10,000 frequently. A typical rock concert, we do a lot of musical events. So when you go back and look at rock concerts going all the way back to Woodstock, typically they're in the 80 to 100 plus patients per 10,000. We're talking about a NASCAR race. It'll end up being 40 to 50 patients per 10,000 attendees. These electronic music festivals, although there's a lot of stuff in the media about how terrible they are, the numbers of patients per 10,000 tend to be in the 10 to 20 range. It's actually much, much lower, similar to what you see at some state fairs, less than what you see when the Pope comes to visit. Numbers of patients for the numbers of attendees was actually considerably lower than we see at a lot of events. But the numbers of people that were transported by ambulance was out of control. It was way up here compared to what we typically see. And the primary reason was because they transported every single person that was a little drunk or a little altered and they didn't need to. I made my recommendations that they start having nurses and physicians just like they've done at any events that are that size. That's really become the standard of care at large events.
But public service announcements regarding the dangers of ecstasy will be posted on their event website and distributed via online during the video channels. This has been initiated by them, and you can see it right now.
When I'm at the decks, I can play deep. Or I can play hard. I can play quiet. I rock the mic and that's no.
But if I don't watch what I'm doing, I'll lose the crowd.
One thing you don't want to play with is ecstasy.
Rolling on ecstasy can cause heart problems, brain damage, stroke, and possibly death.
Take some breaks to cool off and sip on some water.
Avoid energy drinks and caffeine, and don't mix drugs and alcohol.
If you or your friends feel hot or sick, it's okay to ask for help.
Never buy drugs or accept drinks from strangers. You never know what you're going to get.
You can choose to take nothing at all. Educate yourself and your friends on how to stay safe.
So we can all play.
Play. Play another day.
I have a question. At the one of the first graphics, you showed the numbers that are attracted to these events in Miami and in Detroit and a couple of other cities. How do these new measures that we intend to implement compare and contrast to what's been going on in those other cities? Do you produce those events in those other cities? Are they your events as well?
None of the other events that we listed are our events, but we do events all over the United States. And people do look to us to get ideas on how they can improve their festivals around the country.
Okay. I just want to say the amount of preparation that has gone into making it safe is impressive, but it's also kind of creepy, you know? You sit here and you think, we're doing all this, and you know, it makes you feel good, but it also just scares you. I look at this thing, this how to minimize potential harms. It's the same thing. It's like, well, we're giving it out because we expect people to get in trouble. It's just frightening to me. It really is frightening to me. And you guys are doing a great job, but it may be a problem that we can't get around, but maybe you can turn it around. But I'm telling you, I'm personally right at the edge.
So what was the reaction from the Coliseum Commission? We showed you this information.
I think many of the people were open-minded to hear real data, and I think there may have been one or two people that didn't care what the data said.
When the Pope comes to visit, is there a lot of ecstasy use? I wasn't aware of that. I mean, you're comparing the Pope's visit to a concert that has known drug use.
At least one commission member that when I was just trying to present the data did continue to interrupt and didn't seem to really want to hear the data. He just wanted to say how bad raves were.
For a group of people, some of which are of a culture that come here to use drugs, and we know that, otherwise we wouldn't be doing all this. And we're taking those resources potentially away from the community. We're shifting police, we're shifting fire.
And then there was this added issue as to whether municipalities should take on the responsibility of providing resources when these events go on.
How do you guarantee that if somebody in the community has an emergency, they would have gotten the same service? So how do you guarantee the community that?
Well, you know, it's almost like, how do I guarantee the community when I have the Grammys on the 13th or the NBA All-Star that following weekend and then the Academy Awards?
They're going there to do different things.
Yes.
and God forbid something happens to an individual in this surrounding community, and you can't get there to help them because you've got resources here, that's going to be really tough to explain. I'm not going to be part of that explanation.
Let me just ask, I think we have to keep it in perspective. Chief, you mentioned that you're on modified staffing without Electric Daisy in the city?
Yes, we routinely do that.
You work a lot of task force operations?
Yes.
Okay, this happens routinely. And Jerome, I just want to mention, you said you're skittish. We put more resources in this city, and what invented the triple fence was the '84 Olympics. This DNC of the Olympics. Think about the fact that those resources were not looked upon as being robbing another part of the city, and then understand that we do that every day of our lives. The police and fire department work in a task force mode to move resources where there's a need.
And I agree we should keep it in perspective, Commissioner, but there is a culture here that is different than going to the Democratic National Convention or going to the Olympics. So the comparison is interesting, but I think it's highly irrelevant.
I have a question to
Well,
that.
let me just say, I'm glad you think it's irrelevant. I think it's very relevant.
I know you do. I respect that.
And the fact that in deploying resources, if we're going to talk about robbing communities for one event and not talk about robbing communities on another event, then we are not keeping it in perspective.
So these are things that were debated and discussed, and I had to remind people that if you follow the logic of the Coliseum Commission, you could also make a case that Dodger baseball should be off limits today because two fans that supposedly were Dodger fans beat a San Francisco Giant fan in the inch of his life. Now, they invite people to come to Dodger Stadium for a baseball event. They try to tie it into a family affair. They now have a tremendous amount of security and a number of other things. Not one person is called for anything to limit Dodger games or limit access to alcohol or limit anything, even though we have a person that's been in an induced coma. So I think there's a double standard of what people have looked at this, and it's very unfortunate.
2 weeks after that Coliseum Commission meeting, the LA Times began publishing a series of articles about an investigation underway. Patrick Lynch was charged by the DA's office for embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars in public funds for personal expenses. He ended up taking a plea bargain where he had to repay the money and served 3 years probation. Pasquale Rotella was also indicted on 6 felony counts, including bribing the Coliseum to allow EDC to continue to be held. Rotella also was ordered to pay back $150,000 to LA and serve 3 years probation. Now, the financial activities behind these charges, according to the DA, they have been going on for years. In fact, Patrick Lynch had already been the general manager of the Coliseum for 17 years at that point. So I found it rather interesting that the district attorney decided to take action right before the Coliseum was about to launch its first harm reduction program. That investigation, that indictment, effectively put all the activity with the task force and the health department on hiatus. Without the Coliseum, there was really no place to execute and test the task force recommendations in the long term. And for Insomniac and EDC, that was basically the last straw. There was nothing more that could be done. That was basically the end of a 13-year relationship between the Coliseum and the sports arena and the electronic music community.
And I applaud everybody's effort to make these events safer, but they're not safe.
No matter what, Insomniac and EDC is a business, and people have traveled for EDC for many, many years. People will continue to travel for EDC, and all your kids that you're trying to save from the horrible EDC monster, they're gonna go to wherever it is that the new EDC is at. So you're not stopping people from going. The same people are gonna still be there, and they're still gonna be doing the same things. This has become an institution for Southern California and for the rest of the world.
Electric Daisy Carnival got moved to Vegas. There's a lot more rides, there's a lot more people, but LA will always be my home, and I will always rather have it over there because that's where I experienced my first EDC. But regardless of where it's located, I'll still follow it wherever it goes.
So, since you talked to me last and we talked about EDC Los Angeles being so unique that there'll never be anything like that again, still, almost 8-10 years later, I still stand by that. And that event in particular in 2010, the people that attended it were people who were pretty hardcore dance music enthusiasts, you know, because it was right before that bubble, or right when that bubble was you know, forming. That event birthed EDC Las Vegas, you know, and EDC Las Vegas just blew dance music up huge. It's just gotten massive beyond belief, and it's become more of a brand, like a mainstream brand. Tons of electronic music, events and festivals happening now all over the world, especially in the United States. Festivals are rampant, popping up left and right, especially over the summertime. EDC Las Vegas, it still stands as one of, if not the biggest dance music festival in the world. In terms of what Insomniac has done with EDC as a brand is that they've truly branded it. So the EDC name itself has become a brand that represents dance music. If you're an average person who hasn't been exposed to much dance music at all, you might even hear like that joke. It's like, oh, I'm going to the EDCs, you know, or I listen to the EDC music.
Festival goers are savoring every moment of one more night under the electric sky.
As far as like EDC Las Vegas, it's at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Imagine throwing a party in the middle of that speedway, and now that they've been at that venue, they've really learned to optimize and maximize the venue.
Insane. Like this is safer though? Yeah, no, it's so safer. They have water stations, they have everything, paramedic stations, everything, and it's
I think
everybody.
one of the most important things is the fact that they have the refillable water bottles, and you buy it for $10 and they refill it for free, and you can go back all night.
The resources at EDC Las Vegas that have made it more safe has definitely evolved over the years. Now they actually have insane medical staff. Literally their medical staff is so on call, like the moment something happens, you know, if you're at EDC Las Vegas and you see somebody drop, medical people will be there in moments. They're like ninja warriors.
Now the medical team has doctors on site as well as nurses, EMTs. There's also ground control, a group of roaming peers that look for people having a difficult time, making sure that if people need water, they provide water, radioing to dispatch for in case of a medical call, working with security, reporting any type of assault, and then taking people if they need to rest and get away from the stimulus of the festival. Insomniac events are festivals in the United States that are really paving the way for what harm reduction and safety can look like in the US. However, when you look at festivals, there are still multiple deaths per year.
It's only been recently, probably 2010 and later, where we've seen this huge upsurge in pure MDMA related deaths. And it's very much related to the dangers that exist in summer festivals. Outdoor hot environments, the MDMA was a factor, but they're doing it in these environments that are much hotter. They often span multiple days. Where dose does matter, the higher the dose you take, the more susceptible you are to heat stroke in these hot environments. But we're not seeing these fatalities outside of hot environments. For example, Bo Brooks died at Paradiso in 2015, and a heat wave came through. It was over 110 degrees both days of the festival.
A lot of them are misreported as being acute MDMA toxicity overdoses, when in reality, heat exhaustion is a real thing that can cause many other symptoms that are associated with an MDMA overdose. Profuse sweating, people collapsing. If there's MDMA in the system, most likely the coroner is going to attribute that as the cause of death versus, well, they may have died of other factors.
From traffic to heat and security, let's get right to the dangerous heat that will have a huge impact on the thousands in town for this event.
EDC at midnight, it'll be about 98 degrees, 95 at 2 a.m., 92 at 4 a.m.
People are just starting to make their way inside of the venue now, and the heat doesn't seem to be scaring them away, but heat exhaustion may have played a role in some of the more unfortunate events that have been happening here.
3 nights of electronic dance music and lights in the scorching Las Vegas summer. Dane says his daughter's body temperature was 109.
I think a big step that EDC has taken is moving the festival from June to May, so the temperature is significantly lower. However, I think we still have a long way to go.
You know, any deaths are too many, and there's still things that can be done to help educate people. They're still short on a full range of harm reduction.
Night 3 getting underway. The Electric Daisy Carnival wrapping up its 20th anniversary celebration. Hundreds of thousands of music fans have been celebrating 20 years under the electric sky this weekend, with neon lights taking over the Las Vegas Motor Speedway.
Insomniac Events, one of the biggest EDM festival producers in the U.S., is beginning to embrace drug education and harm reduction. This weekend, they debuted Project #OpenTalk. This project is designed as a response to drug-related hospitalizations and deaths in festivals.
Project OpenTalk is a collaboration between the Drug Policy Alliance, Healthy Nightlife, and Insomniac, and they brought in people from a variety of backgrounds. Its main purpose is to provide harm reduction and education in a large festival space to help people make healthier and safer decisions.
Attendees can approach a booth on site at the event and ask trained peer educators questions related to drugs, sex, or mental health. Ultimately, the goal is #SaferPartying.
What makes it special is that it's a combination of resources such as peer support, information on things like the buddy system, how much water you should be drinking, different substances that a person might come across at a festival or in everyday life, or a person that is maybe having a psychotic break for the first time. There's people such as psychologists and social workers on site to handle that and escalate it to medical and make sure that they get the proper attention.
EDC Las Vegas, they brought in the Nevada Department of Public Health and had them educating on sexual health topics.
What makes OpenTalk unique is that it covers issues such as consent and safer sex. Consent is a topic that may not have been discussed as much as it should have, especially in festival spaces. Especially when you're using substances and alcohol, consent is very important. So the younger generation that attends Insomniac events between the ages of 18 and 24 is really opening that conversation. They're grabbing cards that say, please don't touch my body, and giving them to people that are maybe inappropriate with them, and it's just opening up the conversation. So I'm excited to see more of that. As of 2018, Project OpenTalk has worked festivals in California, Las Vegas, Nevada, and also in Texas. Insomniac events, they're the biggest in the United States, so for them to do something like this speaks volumes and sets an example of how other festivals in the US can provide harm reduction services and not be afraid to provide those services.
About every 5 or 10 years, I tend to discover or rediscover what direction harm reduction is moving in America. Obviously for me, it all started with DanceSafe, the first organization to provide direct outreach at raves and massives and festivals. In 2010, Los Angeles County took it to the next level. That was a government agency partnering with the electronic music community. And now we have an initiative such as Project OpenTalk, which is a multi-million-dollar event production company collaborating with nonprofits on a wide range of issues. This has never been done on this scale before in the United States. So does that mean this is going to be the next step in our evolution? Is this the future of harm reduction? We'll just have to wait and see. After being a harm reduction advocate for about 2 decades now, I know what it's like to feel jaded or feel skeptical about progress. But one thing that always brings me back is actually something I learned very early on in this project. It was way back when I was at the Coliseum and Sports Arena, meeting fellow ravers. They reminded me that it doesn't matter how long you've been in the scene, it doesn't matter how long it takes. We will never lose sight and we will never lose faith that mainstream society will fully adopt harm reduction. Are you surprised that they're doing this?
I'm surprised that it took them so long, personally. I mean, you said you've been partying since '99, man. Like, wouldn't you say the same?
So are you impressed that a government agency is like releasing this?
Not really. With time, everything ends up happening that way. Change is inevitable.
Any last words? That's it.
Nope, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.